right. Welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. This one's episode number 26, and it's the last one that I recorded live at the NASW National Conference in Chicago. And I had to do this one from the hotel room because I got locked out at the exhibition hall.
Yep, and I was able to be a part of this one, so that was awesome. And it was a little different for us because we had 3 guests for this one, and also one of our guests, Ausirys Alviz, she was translating for us because we had Spanish-speaking guests as well. So our guests, we had Maria Salvador, and she is a Quiche community advocate in Guatemala, and she works a lot on education there and also women's leadership. And then, as I mentioned, Ausirys, she's a US-based Colombian therapist, and a lot of her focus is on culturally affirming care. She works with migrant families and Indigenous multicultural individuals. And then we also had Vilma, she is the executive director and an educator at MAIA, M-A-I-A, and you'll learn a lot more about MAIA in the episode.
Yeah, and you'll also hear us talk about this in the episode, but one of the coolest things they've got going on is I think it's called the Contextualizing Indigeneity Toolkit for Social Workers. And I'll put that in the description and all that. But make sure you go check it out. It has a lot of resources on decolonizing social work. It even has like a quiz that you can take to see where you're at with a little bit of reflection. So make sure you check that out, the Contextualizing Indigeneity in Social Work Toolkit.
Yeah, and this episode, the energy of those ladies and the work they're doing will come across in this episode. And for me, it was just powerful. I want to learn more about the programs, the work they're doing. But how was it for you?
It was great. Very unique opportunity. Watch the episode. It was great.
Yeah. So enjoy. Peace.
Peace.
Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss. How we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alicia.
I'm Ace, live from Chicago at the NASW conference. I'm in my room this time because I got tired of being down in the lobby and take care of my son. So we're in the hotel room this time.
It's much quieter. I feel there's a calm energy in that hotel room. And so it's kind of weird for me and Ace to be separate. I am on Big Island of Hawaii and Ace is in Chicago. And we are honored to be joined by 3 incredible women. And we have Vilma, Maria, and Ausirys, and they are going to give us some quick introductions so we can get to know them, and then we will start off the conversation. Whoever wants to start, I have Vilma at the top of my screen. If you wanted to just give us a quick intro on who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got into this work.
Hello, I'm excited to talk with you this afternoon. I am Vilma Saloj, Maya Cachiquel woman from Guatemala, youth leader from rural area and a big dreamer. In my organization, we work to empower girls, and it's an organization led by Indigenous women for Indigenous and designed for Indigenous young women in Guatemala. We have a holistic program. We work with community, families, and young leaders in rural area in Solola, Guatemala. Thank you. And I invite Maria.
Hola, buenas tardes a cada uno. Soy una mujer indígena, vivo en Chichicastenango, trabajo en el mercado vendiendo artesanías y también apoyo a una organización de Iberolife Guatemala.
I'm going to be translating. My name's Ausirys. So Maddie introduced herself as an Indigenous woman who works as a social worker at a nonprofit called The Better Life Guatemala, and she also sells artisan work in Chichicastenango, which is where she's from as well.
Thank you. And Dr. Ausirys.
I'll introduce
Yeah, please do.
So my name's Ausirys Alviz. I'm a clinical social worker. I am a first-generation migrant from Cartagena, Colombia, and I just finished my doctorate in social work. So I'm very excited about the next steps and really grateful to be here. So thank you for inviting us all here today.
Thank you so much. And I think this is just going to be such a fruitful conversation because to have perspectives from just international perspectives on social work and revolutionary social work at that, we love to hear it. And I'm sure everyone in the audience does too. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, anyone or everybody, just how you got into social work and what you're doing right now, kind of that journey of getting you to the amazing work you're doing.
Mari, quieren que compartamos cómo nos entregamos social, para que vayas pensando, es decir. So I actually, and I consider Vilma a social worker, although because I think social work is beyond just the licensure and education. So I want to lead with that if she wants to share about that. But what brought me to it is because I've always been interested in healing, and psychology was like the first thing I thought of, right? Like social psychology. But I noticed that there were a lot of gaps with how does culture get kind of put into that space, and then you understanding the systemic parts and the political aspect of healing. There were a lot of, I think, things missing from the medical model within psychology. And so that kind of drew me into that environmental piece of social work that I really, I mean, I went as far as getting a doctorate in it because it's just, there's so much to learn about the profession, but also so much that the profession can learn about other ways of healing and community work and grassroots work. So that's my take on it. And it's informed by my background in being a first generation and really rethinking every day and unlearning what social work is. You could do so much with social work.
I was curious because I've been to Cartagena before, a very welcoming and warm city. How long did you say you've been gone from Cartagena?
Been since I think it's like 20 years now. And I've gone back. It's a beautiful place. I hope that you liked it.
Yeah. It was lovely. The balcones everywhere in the wild city. It was beautiful. Do you know anything about how they do social work there? I was just curious about the contrast.
It's a great question. So I actually am in the works of going back to potentially teach. And I feel uncomfortable going back to teach because I feel like they're more advanced in some ways in how they've designed social work in Colombia as a whole. But it's very contextual to the place that you're in. Cartagena is like one of the largest slave trading ports in all of Latin America next to Brazil. And it's got a lot of Caribbean infused because it's a Caribbean part of Colombia. So they teach social work with the lens and kind of really bringing attention to that, whereas other regions might be more urban and it might be a different focus or more political in a different place. So it's interesting. They don't do, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, they don't do unpaid internships. They train you, and then once you graduate, you get into a profession, and it's expected that you are a training professional. So I really like that about their model. But they do all the same things: the credits, different kinds of credits, more political requirements in terms of your literacy policy-wise, no matter what you're doing, and also they expect more. Like you have to take these like rigorous exams, but it's only one. It's not two. It's not broken up with the clinical piece. And it's not the same as here where you are as an LCSW that you could be a therapist. It's not the same that way. So healing takes place in a more community organizing model than it's broken up here like micro versus macro.
Yeah, that was my first thought. It sounds like a lot more of macro work. You're from the beginning, you're learning more about the environmental, contextual, political atmosphere around social work rather than focusing on that clinical lens, which takes you in a whole different direction.
Exactly. I'm excited to learn
Thank you
more
for
about
that.
them when I go back.
Yeah, thank you. Vilma or Maria, did you want to share your kind of background to this work?
Pues yo soy de una comunidad de Chichicastenango. Vivo, soy vivo en una familia muy grande, que somos de 10 integrantes, 10 hermanos. Entonces estuve viendo la dificultad que estamos viviendo en la familia. A veces nuestros propios padres no nos daban la oportunidad de estudiar. Entonces yo tuve la iniciativa de estudiar de la número 1 en la familia. Estuve investigando sobre el trabajo social. Fue interesante y estudié porque eso me motiva para apoyar a otras personas, a otras mujeres, más las niñas que tienen menos oportunidades para estudiar. Entonces yo estudié, me motivé para estudiar el trabajo social.
So Mari's explaining she's from Chichi and she's of a family of 10 children. And out of all of the 10, she's the first to go to school. And she's really motivated to do that because the reality is that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to study or to pursue a career. And for her to be the first is something that she's highlighting. She's very motivated in that, but beyond that is wanting to empower and support other women and girls that might be coming from that same background. And so this is something that's really drawn her into social work, to want to support other people.
Amazing. Thank you.
My story is similar to Mari, I think. I am the second in my family. I am the second children, but we are 6 in my family. But I am the third generation to have access to finished high school or secondary school, because my grandmother never had the opportunity to attend a school, and my mother only complete 8th grade. And when I finished secondary school, had just 2 options, be a teacher or a social worker, and I decided be a teacher. And I think I don't decide be a social worker, but in my family I had one sister to be a social worker, and in my entire life work with social workers. I know their job, and I think in our program, like Maya, we provide like a holistic education or program for Indigenous women in rural areas, and like the social workers make this work with the families, with the Indigenous leaders in the communities, and how they can involve in their girls' education and the women empowerment too. I think they make amazing job, and in Maya we call them mentors because they have the same background, like from the girls. They are in the first in their family to had access for secondary school and had opportunity to study in the university, and they are a mirror for the girls and for the next generation to inspire that dream are possible for the next generation. And because their parents just had 3 or 2 years education, and that's why like the mentors or the social workers have the key role model for the girls and for the family. Yeah, thank you. That is my connection with the social workers.
That just shows how much social work is, like you said, it doesn't need to just be a license. You get through education, and then you get this license and you're a social worker. It's so many people are doing social work, and that's what revolutionary social work is about, is highlighting everybody that's doing it. And Christian always says social work chose him, right? Rather than you choosing it.
Absolutely. I'm curious, and yeah, thank you, all 3 of you. I'm curious about a couple of things. I think the first would be, you're all in different places and communities, obviously, but I'm wondering where indigeneity is placed in social work where you're working, because here I am and I hate to be here and criticize the NASW while I'm here, but I don't see any Indigenous elders. I don't see, we talk about marginalized people, but I see it placed very far onto the margins, if that makes sense. And for one, we're really just missing out on all of the wisdom and the, eons of history of wisdom. We're missing out on that, but we're also, like I said, continuously marginalizing the Indigenous people here that are involved in social work. And I think we do a little bit better of a job of it in Alaska and Hawaii, where there's, Native Hawaiians and Alaska Natives a little bit more, but still it happens. And I still think even when we bring in Indigenous culture, or say an elder or whatnot, that it's still like something that we're bringing in to help out versus centering it as something that's actually the truth, or that's a real part of what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I can answer that question. And in our research and my organization, we know like the indigenous population are the most population are invisibilized and marginalized in the world. I think for our organization, we want, like I talked with Ausirys, I think last week, how we can visibilize our work, our community in a table, on a place where take the important decisions in the world, right? And the CSW, that is the one space we want to give the voices of indigenous population. In Guatemala, we are 78% of indigenous population, but like the for our government or for our society, say like the indigenous people are the problem. And why? Like the problem because we are in a rural areas. I think women specifically are 57%. Our population are in poverty. Violence based gender, it's very deep in our society. Like the people, how we can access for economic development. That's why, like they say, like the indigenous population are the problem. But how we can uh, to modify or to change that discourse or this that for the society is to we need to visualize the potential of indigenous women or of indigenous population. What you say, like we want, like because we have a practice in our Mayan in cosmogony. We have a practice a health and friendly with the nature for the human rights and how we can transform our life. Like the indigenous people have knowledge and have best practices to continue for this next generation. But I think the one thing for us is like the marginalized and discrimination, because in Guatemala, the machismo and discrimination that is very deep in our society. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think what you said about the visibility is so important because for people, it's one thing to talk about it and to say, go do these things, but for people, young women, to see you ladies and other amazing women out there doing this work and dreaming big and showing that there's so much potential, that's what's gonna make this change. And so I just so appreciate everything that you guys are doing in a challenging environment. Right? How safe is it to be so visible in that machismo environment?
It's hard. It's hard. Like I shared last week, I think we have just one indigenous women in the Congress in this period. And we says like we are 78%, and why we don't have like representation in that key position for to make a big decision for our country. And that's why like I think the path for women and indigenous people to go to visibilize our leadership, our knowledge, and our practices, it's hard, specifically because we don't have space where we can talk about our practices, our experience. And I think for machismo, in our program, for example, we provide parents training every 2 months. And what we teach there, like we provide to them like the accessible to specifically the mentors or like the social workers, talk to them how can like in their home, the responsibility in the home, it's equal, right? men and or boys and women and girls. That's where we start to change that mindset for machismo or for discrimination. And the other thing we do is we empower girls to they find a space where they can share their ideas, they can transform that patterns in our society. I think that the social workers, when they make home visit in our program, that is very helpful to see like the potential of the girls, of the women indigenous in our country. I don't know what is Maria her experience in a better life. I think I want to ask to her like what is her experience about like to work closely with men and with in other places. I want to ask to her. María, ¿cuál es tu experiencia visibilizando el liderazgo de las mujeres o cuál ha sido tu experiencia con el machismo y la discriminación en las comunidades o en nuestro país?
Pues ese es un trabajo muy, muy difícil para, para nosotras como mujeres indígenas. De lo que yo he visto, mujeres no quieren expresarse por miedo a los hombres, porque ellos no tienen la voz o quieren expresarse, pero por miedo a los hombres, de que tienen miedo de que les digan que ellas no pueden o no saben. Entonces se ve mucho lo que es...
Maria is sharing that a big problem is that women can't, it's something about women expressing themselves, really, and that's how machismo kind of affects maybe that power dynamic I think she's speaking to, is they are not able to speak up for themselves, and that's one of the big barriers there.
En la comunidad donde yo estoy, yo en la comunidad, las mujeres, ellas no participaban, tenían miedo de llegar a capacitación, tenían miedo de decir una palabra. Entonces yo les estuve motivando, les estuve diciendo que nosotras las mujeres tenemos el valor, tenemos el derecho de participar y que nos tomen en cuenta las tomas de decisiones que se hacen en la comunidad. Entonces ahora el tiempo que yo llevo en la comunidad, las mujeres ya participan, ellas ya están ahí participando en la comunidad.
Maddie's explaining like a transition that she experienced. So telling a story about how when she started working in the community that she's in now, Panimache Quinto Bajo, that's but Panimache Quinto Bajo is a small village in rural highlands of Guatemala. And so she started going in and she noticed that women weren't speaking up for themselves. They weren't making decisions or being part of that decision-making process. And she noticed like through building relationship and going consistently to the community that slowly she started to notice that women were speaking up more and expressing themselves more and becoming part of that decision-making process in the community, which is something that she's been observing as she continues to go and build that relationship with them.
It's beautiful. So it's the visibility again. It's everyone seeing that a woman, an indigenous woman, can live in this way and speak in this way and have a voice and share her dream. Maria, is there any, for the future, how do you see what needs to change on top of visibility to help more women feel like they can speak up and live the life they really want to live?
Mari, ¿lo entendiste? Dice que más allá de la visibilidad, ¿qué más se necesita para las mujeres, para empoderarlas y apoyarlas?
Pues yo pienso que es motivarlas siempre, porque si no tenemos apoyo, si no motivamos a las mujeres, siempre se quedan allí y no saben de los derechos que nosotros tenemos como mujeres indígenas. Entonces yo pienso es motivarlas, seguir capacitando a todas las mujeres que quieran, que mujeres indígenas, para que todos lleguen a participar y que sepan de que tenemos las mujeres indígenas.
So she shares that motivation and community building is a really important piece here, that a lot of women need to understand their rights. And she mentions really important words that I'm hearing is that capacity building, like to really enforce that you are capable message in that mentorship and that community, that relationship building, and also that they can participate. So how is that looking like? How can I empower, motivate, and kind of build that relationship around that you are capable and that you can also participate? And I also just want to add there, because I've worked with Mari before, and this is something she's humble about. But going into these communities, there's a lot of times there's a lot of like NGOs that come in. They're doctors or teachers, these like more known professions. Mari started going. There are not a lot of social workers, a lot of like international social work kind of coalitions and things like that. And the organization hired her. And throughout the time that she kept going as an Indigenous woman for this small community, the young girls were now saying that, oh, instead of saying I want to be a doctor or a teacher, they're like, oh, I want to be a social worker. And I just think that that's so beautiful, and it speaks to that again, that visibility and that empowerment. But I had to show that in there for her. She's humble about it. It's big. It's big.
That's huge. Yeah, the role models that you're setting. Ausirys, for you, how do you see yourself as an Indigenous woman in this work? What kind of vision do you have moving forward? And what does that mean for you? Are there things that you need to change about your own practice, or what kind of vision do you have for that?
That's a big question. I think that I'm maybe going through an identity crisis as like I'm learning and unlearning things. So I don't introduce myself as Indigenous, and that's been an ongoing conversation of like, when do you claim that? How do you claim that? I believe that I have to be part of a community and building that relationship and going back to my roots and my families to be able to do that. I think there's been a lot of colonization, a lot of harm, a lot of cultural distancing, assimilation, all of those things that have kind of pulled me away from that. And then you add to that the migrational story of like, I'm not Latina, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not Black enough, I'm not white enough. Like, so there's this like internal battle. And it's like grounding myself is something that I think will be a lifelong journey but what I can say is that allyship is active and healing is political, and it is something that I need to continue to behave on, not just like talk about theoretically. And so this was a big part of my doctoral project. And so I actually created a toolkit. I don't know if I shared it with you all. It's called the Contextual, Indigeneity, and Social Work Toolkit. And it's kind of built for people that are not identifying as Indigenous to teach themselves and also unlearn the harming aspects of how we see social work by centering Indigenous ways. So even just being here and translating, like that's my part of the work, and uplifting and doing that. Like, how do we center more voices? Why is there just one or two people? Why is it one politician in a place that's more than 70% Indigenous? Why is it that Indigenous people are responsible for so much of the world's healing and biodiversity, but there's not enough representation in those tables, right? So my part of the work is I'm having an identity crisis, but I'm acting on the things that are valuable, and it really aligns with what you guys talk about and revolutionary social work, like being that change, right? So that means challenging yourself, right? Like decolonizing yourself. And that's a lot. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question quite
Beautifully.
okay.
Authentically.
I think that the toolkit is amazing, and I've only had a brief. I've been so busy, but I've had a brief chance to go through the toolkit a little bit, and it seems like there's so many resources and so many ways that you could look at it. So I want to introduce it to my students in the next couple of weeks. I'm teaching a summer course on substance abuse, but I think it's very applicable for the course. How would you, if you were going to deliver it to my students, how would you encourage them, or how would you tell them to approach it?
It's a good question. I think, again, context is so important. So it's like, what is the topic of the class? What is the culture of that classroom? There's like neurodivergent learners. There's more visual learners. Like, what kind of dialogue is going to be meaningful in that space? So if there's more, like, I know I've taught a few classes, and I've had some students that might be more distressed and may not want to participate in a bigger group. So how can we make it meaningful and maybe individual for them to process? Because it's a lot to digest. Like, there can be a lot of resistance or protection going on when you're looking through things. Like, I'm not doing enough. And I think any social worker maybe goes through that. You see the world and you're like, am I even doing enough? Like, what is enough? Like, how much more can I do? Like, do I just donate or share this post? Like, how do I get more involved? So I think really tailoring it to maybe like case studies or them researching like local work that is already happening. Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, there are people doing work. How can we amplify that? Like, there's a huge land back movement. There's so many examples right now of land given back to communities. So like, how can we highlight the good that is happening and the great work that communities are already working on? And I think that grounds us in reality and not just all this like shock and awe that's in the news and all of the trauma, right? Because one of my great mentors, Dr. Hilary Weaver, she really kind of talked to me about that. It's like, we can't just talk about the trauma and the horrible things. We have to talk about all of the good things and the resilience and the strength and the great work that is already happening. So I would really want to center on that first. And obviously context matters. Like, what's the history locally? Like, how did we get here? Why are you taking a substance abuse class? That is a huge problem in a lot of Indigenous communities, right? Why? Is it just by accident? There's roots to that. Like, what are the roots? So I don't know. I feel like it could go a million ways, and I'm sure that you will do an amazing job. But there's actually an example syllabus with example assignments in the website if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think what you said reminded me too of something me and Ace have been talking about, standing or speaking on things that we are for, rather than just saying what we're against and complaining about what is wrong, or surrounding ourselves with all of the shock or trauma, the suffering. It's so important for us to be aware of those things and to dialogue on it 100%. Also to talk about what are we for and what just the action, the positive action side of it, which I think your toolkit is pushing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Vilma, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about that, but I know that she took a glaze at it because it was intended for like here the context of the in the States, but she took a look at it and it was interesting to hear like that international translate of like, can this like apply in different spaces, because some of us might want to get international work, and even if we're not working in other countries or with other countries, we work with a lot of displaced populations as social workers, so like that work and knowing that matters too. So I don't know, Vilma, if you want to like speak to that or what your thoughts were.
Thank you, Ausirys. Yeah, I think toolkits like this help a lot of social workers, and for us, we want to learn in how is the social workers in other countries, but also how the social workers have like their, how do you say, like when they come from the same community, like indigenous population, have the context, the knowledge, have the tools that they know what work in the community, and how we can help the other social workers to discuss and research many topics, what helps their job, or how they can make a better work in our community. I think like when I met Ausirys and we learned about her PhD project or research, for us, like, okay, she knows why indigenous, like, centered the voices of indigenous people in social workers. That's very important for the indigenous population, and how we can to share best practices. Like she is in New Jersey and we are in Guatemala, but how we can share best practices in social workers, can apply or can learn between this work. I think that is very helpful for us. And yes, I think my coworkers, they are very ready to explore and read the toolkit, like what Ausirys had now for all social workers.
You bring up a good point of the sharing practices from different areas of the globe. I'm wondering for you, Vilma and Maria, how, when you talk to our series, what are the similarities and differences that you do see with the work in Guatemala versus the work that happens in social work in the US?
Maybe I can go first. Lo que dijo María es, para que vayas pensando, es cuál es la diferencia que tú ves entre trabajo social en Guatemala y el trabajo social en Estados Unidos. I think in Guatemala, for my coworkers, they know the root, they have indigenous roots, and they know the context. They know like what indigenous population faced historically, because in Guatemala we had 36 years civil war, internal civil war, and that's make like a population like they cultivate like a culture, silent culture for women and for all in our country. And for me, our social workers have their approach with community. It's very, very close and very, they have they have approach with the community, with the people. And I think the difference between the social workers in Guatemala to USA, like for me, it's a big difference is like the access for to study in the university, to study or like to access for books or network. That is very big, huge. Like when I went for first time in USA, I say like in every house, or like if like the people have a possibility, but they have a book, like they have a book in their home. But here in Guatemala, that is no books in the houses. And how we can read, research about our history, and how we can write about our history. I think that is a very big difference. But for the other thing, a good thing for me is like our social workers, they are rich in the context about what is the local organization and how indigenous people have we have our system for decision, how we can make decisions, and we like our social workers know what happened in the community and in how we can build the knowledge together with the community, with the indigenous population. I think that is a very good and positive for me, because like our social workers in Maya, we call them mentors. They have how do you say, aceptación in the community with the local leaders and what they work, and also we have a credibility in the communities with the people. That is very important to me for the social workers.
Yeah, I have so much to say after Maria.
Pues para mí tiene una gran diferencia social en Guatemala y en los Estados Unidos. Como dijo la compañera Vilma, se ve mucho la diferencia en acceso a una biblioteca o para acceso al Internet. Yo tengo mi experiencia. Yo vivo en una comunidad de Chichicastenango. En el tiempo de COVID no tuve acceso al Internet, me costó demasiado. Tuve que moverme a otro lugar para poder conectarme en las clases. Entonces yo veo mucho la diferencia de aquí en Guatemala. Es muy difícil que en los Estados Unidos también, cuando uno ya se graduó de trabajo social, se ve mucho, digamos, no hay una oportunidad de trabajo. No hay donde poder aplicar o social, no hay donde poder ejercer, no es igual que Estados Unidos, hay más oportunidades que en Guatemala.
Maddie's sharing that there's a big difference in terms of accessibility, like even as a student, social worker, like or even at like different levels, just access to books or like literature or the internet, something like the internet. And that even during COVID, for example, like thinking about those barriers over there, it's really different because there was no access to even continue to pursue work or connecting to education or work in that. So like that really added like an added layer of barriers to opportunities. But then even the continuation, so like after graduation, what happens? And the opportunities are not as readily available or accessible. So access is such a big problem and something that's really different.
We take it for granted. We really do. How much access that we have. And just when you talk about like having books in the house, I mean, completely, we take it for granted how many books we do have in the house.
And I want to add one other thing. I think it's similar in the worldwide. Like the pay for the salaries for the social workers is very low, but their work, or like Mary's, Ausirys works, and your work, it's very transformative for the communities. For I saw in Guatemala, like social workers are translate. They translate, like Mary has a lot of experience about this, like community or like people don't speak in Spanish because in Guatemala that is our official language. But in Guatemala we have 25 national languages, and like the social workers translate for anything in our society, and they are how do you say, I think like estudios
Socioeconomic studies.
socioeconomic studies for different aspects with NGOs, with the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Education, for scholarship or for some help for the families. And I think like the social workers help the violence-based gender in the community. They have a key role in the communities, specifically because in Guatemala we like all the system in Guatemala is not based on indigenous system or Mayan system, and that's why like it's very hard with judge. I think that is juez. Ausirys, juez. How do you say juez?
Judge.
Judge, right? With the judge for official process with family, with children. And I think like that's why I say like their pay, like social worker salaries is very low, then they are transformative work in the communities. Yeah,
Hmm.
that is the other difference, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think was there a comment, Christian, in the
Yeah, and I think that they've already kind of touched on it quite a bit, but
mm,
Jesse wanted to know how you all balance, the mainstream social work paradigms and whatnot or practices with indigenous values. I think it's a very important question, so maybe we can answer it a little bit more deliberately. But you
yeah.
have all touched on it so far.
I think I can lightly touch on just my experience here, and I know that they're speaking to a different context, but so like I'm in Lenapehoking land, so New Jersey region, and I'm in like the south of New Jersey, which feels like the south of the U.S. And but I've worked really, oddly enough, with a lot of Guatemalan migrants, and a lot of them come from indigenous backgrounds where they didn't even speak Spanish. And it's like, oh, you speak Spanish, you're the social worker, go. And you're going to take all these cases that I didn't even speak, Quiche or a lot of the different languages that exist in Guatemala. And so I learned a lot about the humility piece of there's no such thing as cultural competence. You can't be competent. I can't even be competent
Mm-mm.
in Colombian culture. Like, that's not a thing. And so I'm really happy that I can provide that transparency right off the beginning with any client, person, human that I'm working with, because I work with a lot of people that have similar stories to mine, being displaced and migrating to a different place, and even me knowing I don't even know everything about my own home and culture and everything, and I'm still connecting to that, and providing that space instead of just the DSM and cultural competence, and how that's a mainstream kind of staple to social work, that we think we know everything but we don't. And I've seen a lot of beautiful work with people that are like first gen Latinos. They consider themselves Latino Americans, and even something as like, you talk about coping skills, the mainstream ideas of coping, so journaling, but like really personalizing it to the roots of the people. And I had some people that were from Ecuador, and they were really far displaced from any indigenous or native practices, but she loved to sew, and we did some deep dive into like, what does that mean? Like, did your grandparents, did people, and kind of just like relearning from family, and come to find out there's a history of a lot of people in our family that love to knit and create baskets and weave baskets. And so that became something accidentally that we discovered that was like much more ingrained biologically, like in her, right? And so we talk about intergenerational trauma, but there's also a lot of intergenerational culture and resistance, like whether we're attached to it or aware of it or not. So that's a little bit of what I can speak to, and kind of challenging that. I don't know if I imagine you've heard of like Decolonizing Therapy. I love that book. Dr. Mutt, it's just everything about it. I really try to center a lot of the work I do clinically because we could do so much harm in a clinical space, right? Erasing what's left. And so I like try to be really intentional with that in the clinical work that I do. I have big problems with the DSM, but we won't get into
We could do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I think that we share your concerns, and so I'm very happy for you to hear somebody, speak up about it. And I really can't stand the idea of cultural competence. It's just such an unattainable thing. Even if you lived somewhere for a long time, it's still really unattainable to be competent. There's no such thing. Even I like the word. It's not perfect, but I like cultural humility a little bit better because it acknowledges that, hey, I'm not going to know everything, but I'm here to learn, and I'm here to try to understand the best that I can, knowing that I'm never going to be competent in it. So I really appreciate that you brought up that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're trying to medicate grief, right? Like we're trying to diagnose grief, and there's so much cultural grief, and we're not talking about that. And yeah, like you said, could be hours talking about this, but yeah, it's good to name that.
I also really like how you were speaking about, kind of making space for people to be themselves and kind of utilize the tools that work for them, that is ingrained within them and their basically their historical memory and all of that. And I think too often we try to force people to be something or to do something a certain way, and it doesn't work. And then you even talked about, pathologizing someone using the DSM manual. And I just wanted to throw something your way. And I'm not sure if you're aware of his name is Dr. Michael Yellowbird, and he's actually in Canada. Mindful Decolonization, I thought, is right in alignment with what you're talking about.
That's in my toolkit. I definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Incredible human as well. As everyone was talking, I think Vilma, Maria, you were talking about the difference in Guatemala of it being localized, and so the social workers are very aware of the context of the environment. And I do worry about in America how we're doing so much virtual remote work now in communities that we've never been to. And so you're so detached from what's happening, and working in Alaska and Hawaii it's just opened my eyes to how important it is to know the culture, to not be competent in the culture, but to be aware of what is important in the culture, the values, the people, the history, the generational trauma, but also the generational wisdom and practices. And I really worry about that because I still work with people in Alaska, but we've lived there for about 3 years. And so I have a very small amount, right, of awareness. But then we have a lot of clinicians, therapists, social workers on the mainland US working remotely to help people in rural Alaskan communities. And I just worry about that disconnection there. And so I don't know really what we can do about that, but I didn't know, Vilma or Maria, if you had any comments on that or thoughts about maybe what we should be doing differently in that way, or what you see in Guatemala working because it is so localized.
Ausy, ¿puedes traducir la pregunta?
Sí, que está hablando de la desconectación que hay, no se conecta todo, entonces hablando del acceso también, con esa falta de conexión, cómo se entiende el acceso a poder conectar a las personas y también el trabajo para que sea reflejado significativamente en el entendimiento a la comunidad y también llevándole servicio.
Sí, ese es un problema que estamos viviendo aquí en Guatemala. Específicamente yo estoy viendo que en mi comunidad hay muchas dificultades en acceso al Internet. Por eso que muchos jóvenes no quieren estudiar porque no tienen acceso al Internet, a un libro, o digamos no tienen acceso económicamente para pagar transporte, porque sabemos que tenemos que viajar para ir a la universidad o para ir a estudiar. Entonces muchas familias no tienen la oportunidad de dar ese estudio a sus hijos, más a las niñas. Entonces se ve es complicado estar estudiando, uno que vive muy lejos y dar al Internet es difícil.
So Maddie's speaking to, again, the barriers to the accessibility of like learning, the internet, literature. it really just takes away the motivation of people wanting to kind of get more involved with like either services or education. And it really complicates the continuity of like following up and following through, and that's a really big issue that they're trying to work with. And I think even for context, like I went to Guatemala, transportation is a very big barrier. I mean, it's not a straight road. You have to go like 4 hours just to get across like maybe 20 miles, 30 miles sometimes. And so the access to even that, I mean, it's hard to even just imagine it because here there's like maybe more roads everywhere, but that is visibly, I think, an infrastructural issue that I think is also intentional. But we'll get into that.
Y también como no hay muchas oportunidades de estar ejerciendo la profesión, pues, a veces la misma familia te desaniman que para qué estudias porque no hay muchas oportunidades y es una pérdida de tiempo estar estudiando y al final no conseguir un trabajo para poder ganar dinero.
So she's speaking to also just like the psychological transmission of that, kind of like a despair in the family too, of like, well, why are you going to study or why are you going to get involved with that if you're not going to find opportunity? You're not going to follow through with this. Why even get involved? Why bother?
And so the motivation then is impacted from that perspective. Thank you.
In my experience during COVID or like COVID-19 for like indigenous communities, disconnected with, I think, everything. And the one experience we had with my coworkers is like how we can facilitate all the information about that situation, about that crisis in our native or mother tongue. And that's why, like with my organization across the country, we make a small video record and we send that in different like radio, TV. We make that alliance with different partners here in Guatemala, where the indigenous population can hear about all the instruction and how they care their health during that time. I think like the internet, what Maria says, it's very the big barrier for indigenous communities. And I think the powerful of social worker is they can go to they work on the field. They know how we can support the community, how we can talk with the leadership in the community. I saw my coworkers, they go with a local leadership, the parents, and we share that video record for our network, and they share that instruction in our mother tongue. And that's helped a lot during that time. And I think for like the values or how the people feel disconnected to is like for innovation. For example, IE right now, for them, it's like they can't understand very well how that's work. And like for us in Maya, it's very important to training the parents or grandparents about the new things come through our community. And that's why we say it's like the social workers or mentors are like the role model for the community, for the next generation in everything, I think. And the people believe in them. Like she come in the same from the same community, like Maria, like other mentors. We believe in her, in what she shared with us about like the innovation or about the new things come to our community. That is very powerful to the work. I think.
Yeah. And you can't get that on a screen all the time. Those home visits are so important, and going out in the community physically is huge. Thank you so much. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. I know you were all so busy. Chris, I didn't know if you had any more questions on your end you wanted to ask.
I just want to say that I appreciate the entire conversation, and I think, well, I don't think I know, one of our core values of revolutionary social work is to recenter Indigenous African perspectives. And one of the things that I remember, I think maybe it was Vilma, it was you at the beginning talking about, was language and how there are, I can't remember the number that you gave, but a lot of different languages in the area. And I was talking to another man and he was actually from Tanzania over in Africa, and the same issue where Swahili is the main language, but they also speak English, but there's a variety of tribal languages. And the government over there at this point is trying to get everybody just to speak Swahili and English so that they're viewing it as, unifying them. But from my perspective, I've seen the devastation that in Hawaii and Alaska and elsewhere, when the indigenous languages are removed, what it does to the people and what it does as far as removing worldview and all of that. And I was wondering if you had just lend some perspective on that and what's the situation as far as indigenous languages.
Sí, está preguntando que la importancia de la preservación de lenguajes, porque él conoce personas en diferentes países, yo creo que un país en África, Tanzania, a veces tratan de quitarle el lenguaje o la capacidad de la persona a hablar el lenguaje, y tú mencionaste que allá hay muchos diferentes lenguajes tribunal o indígenas, entonces ¿cuál es la importancia de eso? Y hablando sobre el tema de la fortaleza de mantener la...
Pues para mí es importante mantenerlo siempre las lenguas, porque sí, aquí en Guatemala hay varias lenguas. Como Vilma habla en cachiquel, yo hablo en quiché. Entonces es muy importante que hay que motivarnos a hablar siempre el idioma, porque yo conozco a muchas familias que a veces ya no hablan las lenguas, ya no enseñan a sus hijos, ya solo el español. Es difícil que uno no habla el idioma, porque para ir en una comunidad o para hablar con personas ya mayores, ellos no hablan español, no hay una forma para comunicarnos con ellos si no sabemos el idioma. Entonces es importante que debemos de conservar nuestros idiomas de que hablamos.
Maria is speaking to the fact that it is really important, and something that she observes in a lot of her work is that language transmission is valuable, but a lot of the kids are either not being taught the language or they're not learning it. And so she mentions a story of like, okay, well, speaking to the elders of the community, we have to speak in our native tongue. Like she speaks, Maria speaks Quiche and Vilma speaks Cachiquel. That importance of transmitting that so that there's that continuity in the family, because you could speak to an elder in the indigenous language, but then the children can't do that. And so like even within that dynamic, you would need to be able to have to translate, because there's that miscommunication.
Y a veces ese es un problema, porque he visto yo en muchos lugares que cuando uno busca un trabajo, siempre piden, si hablas el idioma o la lengua, puedes estar en el equipo, porque es importante hablar para poder comunicar con las personas, porque hay personas mayores, llegan en la organización, instituciones, y a veces uno no habla el idioma, no puede comunicarse con las personas. Hay lugares que piden siempre hablar el lengua para comunicarse y optar el trabajo.
So she's also speaking at a professional or career driven level, like you do need to know these different languages, because if you're providing services, you need to be able to speak to the elders or people seeking services. And so it's really important to preserve that so that that cycle kind of continues. You can speak with the elders, you can facilitate that access, and be able to speak to the community too. And a lot of jobs will ask for that too.
And that is the one way to respect to the value of the community. I think that is very powerful to like the social workers work in the community. What I say, like Maya, it's an indigenous centered organization. We respect a lot of their values, of our traditions in the community. And like, for example, in our program, when we work with the family, we include entire family, like grandparents, parents, and children. and that is intergenerational dynamic. It's very powerful in the community, and that's why our social workers need to speak the same language. And in our program, we focus too on it. They learn about their story. They preserve their strong roots independently. If she wants to study in USA or in capital city or in other country, we want that the girl use her identity, her language, what we wear in our community is her strength to achieve her dream in this world. I think the social workers make a big work with big and deep work with the family and with the girls to inspire them to continue preserve our values and our practices in our life. And I think that is one way to respect the value in the indigenous communities.
Yeah.
I had just one last question from me, and that is, you may have a different term for it, but we call it talking circles. And I've been using them. First of all, I learned them from some Alaska Native elders a while, like several 10 plus years ago. And I've implemented them into my courses. And they've just been phenomenal as far as each individual allowing them space to talk and to share and to listen to each other. But when they're at their best is when we have elders in there as well that help set the tone and kind of guide us in the wisdom and what we're talking about. I'm wondering how you all have seen elders be able to be incorporated into social work or even social work education.
That is very interesting. I think interesting question. I had the opportunity last year. I went to Seattle and I had the opportunity to share with 19 indigenous leaders across the globe. And we talked about the indigenous rights too, and how we include that the wisdom from elders to the next generations, and how they can, because they have a lot of tools, a lot of knowledge, a lot of things to give to this world. I think that traditional education don't include that seriously in Guatemala. In all the it don't include the voices of indigenous elders and to share that their experience. But it's very interesting because in our school or in Maya, in our program, we included them because specifically, or because they read what happened in the nature, in talk about their experience or what the world face for this season or for this year. In the Mayan spirituality, for example, we have 20 nahuales, and we have a 13 energy in our Mayan spirituality, and we invite the elders or some traditional guide who share his experience with the next generations. And that is part of our curriculum. It's not just one activity, separate the curriculum and the other activity. I think we have reached in Guatemala, but how the leaders can include this activities, or that activities are part of their curriculum. It's very hard because they need a rule in the high level of leadership. Okay, we can do that, but at Maya, because we have our principal program is a school, we include that into the curriculum. And that's why it's very, very important for our students and for our team too, because we know their experience is very valuable for this next for this generation. Yeah, that is my comments. Maria.
I love how you explained that. Yeah, it's so just to touch on because revolutionary social work is a lot about it's value based, right? It's not include this activity here and this activity here. It's live these values, just like you're saying. You live that within Maya. It's not just a one class or half a class you do,
Yeah.
which is beautiful.
Yeah, and the next generation have a lot of questions about that. And I can't imagine if like the universities or like Ministry of Education include that activities in the curriculum. That is very, I think we have, how do you say, we have reach.
A richness or wealth.
Yeah, yeah, to transform education in Guatemala. And that's why I say, like, in front of our government or this system, like indigenous population are the problem. But in Maya, we says we are the solution. We are not the problem. Like indigenous population on communities, we are not the problem. We are the solution. Like the change, like the discourse about how we can include the indigenous traditions values into the traditional education.
Thank you.
Voy a pensar. No, pues yo pienso que es importante buscar unas herramientas o buscar herramientas para poder implementar a ellos que puedan, digamos, participar con los trabajadores sociales y que ellos también tengan una voz para ser involucrados.
She says that it's important to find a way for them to participate, for elders in the community to participate, and to also find their voice in that participation, and that's a valuable piece there. I do want to share like one experience. Recently, I went to a conference in Dickinson College in PA, and they actually they brought an elder from one of the communities in Alaska, and the elder was involved, and even just like the break when we go eat, in the prayer and the talking circle, like that was probably the first experience I've ever had where that was implemented. And even the structure of the conference, where there were like art tables and beading tables, and there was an altar table, and people can come in. Like time was not time; it was our time and the time of the spirit of the session and the conference and how it went. And I think that they have that every year at Dickinson College, and they were talking about the Carlisle Institute and the remembrance of the names of the schools and kind of reclaiming a lot of stories back. But I would say that's the first time I've ever seen a social work structured, like bringing in that circle and an elder into it. Yeah, so I want to share I did have that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, and the way that Ace includes it online too is very unique. Like trying to keep those values, and I know you can speak to it a lot better than I can.
Yeah, I think I mean, I only do them online because they've taken away the physical space and where our classes are online. But I think you just have to be creative about it and find unique ways to facilitate a circle. The important thing is that you're adhering to, those values of deep listening and understanding, which I think are indigenous values, right? I think that's what's important, is for it to be value-based. And there's a number of ways that you can facilitate it. And it's never going to be the same as in person. You can't make eye contact the same way. You can't let somebody know you're listening. You can't, touch somebody on the shoulder, or you can't, but you can adhere to the values, and you can listen to folks, and you can make sure that they know they're being listened to. And I think that from the feedback that I've gotten from students, that it makes all the difference in connecting or reconnecting them. And I think one thing that you mentioned too was the issue of time, right? A talking circle doesn't always fit in cleanly into time, because I'm not giving you a 3-minute time limit to talk. And so it may very well go over the time limit. And so it doesn't fit often in, Western colonial frameworks like a regular class. And so you have to be willing, to step outside of those bounds. And what I found is that the students are very willing. And when we go over, say our class is supposed to end at 7 p.m. or something like that, 90+% of the students, obviously some people have a job or something they have to go to, but almost everyone stays and honors the circle and continues to listen. It seems like it's such a simple practice that can be a solution for so many. I mean, imagine even if children were participating in talking circles in school all the way up until they were adults. Imagine what a different world we would live in. But instead, we don't do that. We worry about all these other things. And so I would like to see, talking circles put in on a much larger scale.
We need to include that in a public policy to
Mhm.
make that in every level, right? That is very powerful. In my experience, like when we stay in circle and to heard one elder to share his or her experience, is like the respectful is very deep during that circle. The other thing is like when the children participate, it's have the same respect to the elder and to the children. In my experience, that is very interesting in that interaction with the community and the family. Yeah, I can't. We need like the public policy for that talking circle in every level of education. That's very
Mhm.
powerful. Yeah.
And in politics, if the politicians sat down in a talking circle, the world would be a different place. Don't know how we get that to happen. Well, I know there's so much more we could get into, but I would love to finish by everybody just sharing something, that a message you want to share with our listeners, a piece of advice or a vision you have for the future.
I think I want to share the social workers, their approach to the community was respectful. And I dream to the future. We want to dignity, their salary, their work, and contribution to this world because they are a role model for the next generation. And specifically in Guatemala, we want to more leaders, community leaders, indigenous girls leaders in a table where they can make a decision for all and looking for more equity society in Guatemala and for all.
Pues la visión que yo quisiera yo y quiero para Guatemala, que, que haya más oportunidades para las niñas, más las mujeres indígenas, porque no tenemos acceso a oportunidades que hay en Guatemala, ya que nosotros como trabajadores sociales trabajamos para el futuro, digamos, queremos que Guatemala sea más equitativa. Entonces, eso es la visión que yo quiero para Guatemala, que sea más justa.
Vilma, le intentas a traducir eso?
Okay, I can try. And her vision for Guatemala is make more the society equitable and with justice for all, and to have access to for more opportunities for the social workers in the country.
Thank you.
I guess I can share something that's just been a theme this week for me and even in sessions is actually a quote from Dr. Resma Menachem. Can I read that? Is that
Please.
trauma decontextualized in a person looks like personality. Trauma decontextualized in family looks like family traits. Trauma decontextualized in people looks like culture.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Is that something you've been sharing with the people you work with?
Yes, and something I've seen around a lot and I really share a lot is that you're not broken, because a lot of people feel broken when they have a lot of trauma. It's like 90% of the work I do. Systems aren't built for us. And so it's going to feel like you don't fit in because you're not supposed to. It's not built for you. The survival mode that we're constantly in, right? And so I really like that quote. I think it's grounding because it's all about context. You're not the problem in this situation. You know, we have to confront a lot of things, but yeah, there's a lot of systemic violence in our spirit, right? In our
Mm-hmm.
Is that from My Grandmother's Hands?
I believe so. I follow him on LinkedIn, so I'm always just saving all the quotes.
All the quotes.
Yes, all the quotes.
It's a bone for everyone too. If you're interested and if that quote resonated for you, check out his book, My Grandmother's Hands. It's a very relatable, easy to read book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one thing that sticks out. Sorry, Vilma.
And Alicia and Christian, what is your vision for the future for the social worker?
Thank you for
We have the
asking,
same
Vilma.
question to you.
To have more conversations like this. I think this is incredible to hear different voices, perspectives, but also to see you three women as role models for myself too, and for anyone listening to this. And I think a vision for revolutionary social work to share that with as many people as we can, because like we say, it's value based. And so it's not about providing a service to someone or selling something to someone, right? It's sharing these values with people that they can live in their lives and share with the people that they're working with, help themselves feel healthier, happier on that healing path so that they can help their community do the same thing. So more conversations like this and sharing the message of revolutionary social work is my vision. About you, Ace?
Yeah, I think when I answer these questions, there's a lot of different things that I could say, and I agree with everybody what you said. But I would go again to reconnection. It would be reconnected, and I think we are so in this, colonization for everyone to different degrees, but to everybody, it's made us forget ourselves and each other. And, although we may have different cultures and we may have different life experiences, we all started from one and it's been branched out. And so the more we can remember that and that we can reconnect and, like I said earlier, like recentering Indigenous wisdom, not just bringing it in as, like this side thing. And it's hard to do, because you're in these systems that are in place. It's hard to do. But to bring them in and recognize the value that is there. And once we're able to recenter those things, then we'll remember how to be ourselves and we'll love each other and we'll have kinship with each other. That's the future that I see and what revolutionary social work is.
More connection, more love. And you three all emanate that. So appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I really hope that we can have more conversations with you three too. A part 2 of this, I think we can talk on more. But just gratitude, wish you all the best, your families all the best, your communities, and yeah, let's keep talking.
Thank you.
Thank you for
guys
the
so much.
opportunity. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Lisa and Cacique Panjoj, for this opportunity to talk and to share our thoughts and experience and our voice in this program. I love a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.